In the Bible, we don't have a hierarchy of gods. We have one God.
All right, let's see it.
We don't have a myth in which, the gods order themselves. You've got one God who's in charge. All the other gods are servants or slaves to him.
You see this from beginning to end in the Bible. You have the Hebrew Bible adopting the title Elyon, Most High, from the Northwest Semitic pantheon as a reference to the deity who has sovereignty over the other gods. You see in Deuteronomy 32:8, Elyon, Most High, dividing up the nations according to the number of the B'nai Elohim, the children of God. The divine hierarchy is conceptualized according to two different frameworks depending on the time period and who's doing the conceptualizing. You have the Syro-Palestinian bureaucracy framework, and you can see a description of that in Lowell Handy's book, Among the Host of Heaven. And then you have the patriarchal household framework, and you can see that described in Mark Smith's book, The Origins of Biblical Monotheism. You have Psalm 82, where God takes his place in the divine council. God judges among the gods, and then God deposes the other gods of the divine council, the other patron deities of the nations, condemns them to mortality, and then the psalmist calls on Elohim to rise up, Kuma Elohim, for you will inherit all nations. You have in Psalm 97:7, in the original version of Deuteronomy 32:43, which is preserved in the Dead Sea Scrolls fragment 4Q Deuteronomy Q, worship him all you gods, a call for the other gods to worship their sovereign deity. You have, even in the New Testament, references to this idea that there are powers and principalities throughout the universe that are unseen and that God has sovereignty over them. The notion that there's only one God, there's not a hierarchy of gods in the Bible, is profoundly misinformed.
And then that replicates itself in the human realm, right? You see in the other mythologies, you have the hierarchy of the gods, and then that hierarchy replicates itself among the humans, right? And so it's natural, in a sense, to think of, oh, well, if there's a hierarchy of gods and there's one lead god or several, and then there are slave gods, if you like, the same thing would be true on human cultures.
It's actually exactly the opposite. Human social relationships and frameworks and hierarchies are projected onto the divine world, and I discuss that in some detail in my book, Adonai's Divine Images, a cognitive approach which uses the research from the cognitive science of religion to show how deity is conceptualized in the Bible and even today.
The Bible, different picture altogether. No, there's one God. The humans are not his slaves. He never treats them as slaves.
Again, from beginning to end in the Bible, God's followers are repeatedly referred to as Abdim and as Thuli, which are Hebrew and Greek words for slaves. Paul repeatedly emphasizes the notion that the followers of Jesus are slaves of Christ. You also have repeated commands that God's followers obey God's commands. You have the representation of the relationship of Israel to God as that of sovereign and vassal, borrowed from Neo-Assyrian vassal treaties. According to the Bible, God's followers are ideally slaves to God.
He treats them as partners who are called in to cooperate with him.
The notion that God treats God's followers as partners is not in the Bible.
And in some sense, called into his divine life with them.
You do have within Greco-Roman period Judaism, and then within the more philosophically minded streams of tradition within the New Testament and early Christianity, a notion of theosis or divinization, but that is largely muted within the main streams of tradition within later Christianity.
Very different picture. And I just wonder, back to the idea of why is the biblical tradition, why does it tend to produce equality, self-government, liberty?
The biblical tradition does not emphasize these ideals, and the biblical tradition has never been the proximate cause of their salience within society. Those minority streams of tradition within early Christianity that asserted the equality of all humanity were primarily because of the influence of Greek philosophy. When you get the rise of Renaissance humanism, when you get the Reformation's deconstruction of ecclesiastical authority, and when you get Enlightenment rationalism and concern for natural rights, you get the modern concepts of equality, of self-governance, and of liberty. The biblical tradition, the biblical text is not the proximate cause of these things.
These other traditions don't. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's this fundamental difference in how they picture the universe.
No, this is a wildly uninformed and inaccurate representation of biblical approaches to divine hierarchies and to equality, self-governance, and liberty. This is an attempt to negotiate contemporary ideals back into the Bible so the authority of the Bible can be leveraged in the service of structuring power, values, and boundaries in favor of Christian nationalism, right-wing authoritarianism, social dominance orientation, and militant masculinity. And this is certainly the MO of Jordan Peterson, and it also seems to be the MO of whoever this person is.